welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen Fospero. Today's guests are the dynamic couple who founded the Travel Project with a simple aim to encourage regular exploration in everyday life. Charlie Wild and Jess Last have spent the last 3 years exploring the UK in search of unique and exciting experiences, and boy did they find them. From climbing the peaks of the Scottish Highlands to surfing the breaks off Northern Ireland, foraging in the deepest forests of Snowdonia to camping wild on Dartmoor, all of their adventures are on socials, and 52 of their most unforgettable trips are documented and beautifully illustrated in their new book, Achievable Adventures. I'm delighted they've come up to London from their home in the Cotswolds to tell me all about their travels and hopefully inspire us to take much more advantage of what's actually on our doorstep. It's wonderful to meet you both. I've followed you for such a long time on Instagram, and you can probably tell from the intonation in my voice when I just listed a few of your adventures that I'm a little adventurer myself, and I feel so inspired by what you do. Charlie, start off by telling me what was the thinking behind you packing up and heading off?
It's a very good question. We were discussing this on the train on the way in because, we're 5-6 years deep into the project now, so you have to rack your brains back into the archives. But essentially it was about the feeling that we got when we went outdoors and how alive we felt, and I suppose happy on a really basic level. And we discussed, well, how can we get that feeling more regularly? How can we build it into our lives, our lifestyle diet, if you will? Quite quickly, we came to the conclusion that adventure in its conventional, traditional sense is quite an expensive, exclusive pursuit. Going to faraway lands on aeroplanes, spending lots of money and lots of time. So how could we kind of reframe that and look at adventure in a different way that would allow us to experience it regularly? And we came up with this concept of achievable adventure, which is basically lowering the barriers to entry. It could be a really small couple of hour adventure on an evening, all the way through to, week-long adventures. But we thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we didn't leave the UK at any point? We don't use any aeroplanes for our project. We just search up and down the UK and search for the best experiences. So that's kind of how it came about. And we started to build a bit of a following, and we realized that people were messaging us saying, oh, I did your Outer Hebrides adventure, or I went down to Dungeness on the south coast of England and I loved it. And that got us thinking that perhaps we should put together a bigger project that was a body of work that showed people how they too could experience the UK.
Jess, do you think in a way attitudes have changed and that for a long time people perhaps thought the UK was a bit boring?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how people used to think about it. Well, I know we did, at least. And I think growing up in the sort of 80s and 90s, we all saw it. We both got taken on holidays, to Yorkshire and stuff. And it was often in the winter, it was raining and just felt a bit sort of, we'd call it the walking boot brigade, or soggy sandwiches and National Trust properties. And not that there's anything wrong with National Trust properties, but it's not very cool, I suppose. It's not what sort of young adventurers sort of aspire to do. But as we've explored, we realised that doesn't even scratch the surface of what we've got. We're an island of islands. I think we've got, I'm going to get this wrong now, but I think there's over 6,000 islands that make up the UK, which is amazing. And I think about over 300 are inhabited. So there's loads to explore there. And you realise there's actually a lot of cool, interesting people doing interesting things around the UK, and just amazing epic landscapes and stuff as well to explore.
When you first started, Jess, where did you start out?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Good question, yeah.
Well, we have to kind of go back a bit. What we'd actually did, we both worked in advertising, and we decided for the last year of our 20s, we wanted to do something different because we got bored of that 9-to-5 loop, going to work, going to the pub, all great fun. But by the end of the year, we almost couldn't really remember what we'd done differently. It just all blurred into one. So we went away traveling for a good stint. I think it was about 8 months abroad, and went on these amazing adventures. But obviously we had to come back home, and we realised what regular adventure had done to us mentally and physically and how good we felt. But we also realised it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable. We needed to go back to work for a start. So sort of monetary standpoint, it wasn't. But we also, this was a while back now, but it was coming into everyone's awareness of just how bad taking, regular flights and that kind of thing was. And we'd gained a little bit of a following, as Charlie said, but it didn't feel quite right to be telling people, all you have to do is jump on a flight to India which is just unrealistic for most people. They're kind of once in a lifetime trips, as it was for us. But we wanted to keep that feeling going with the regular adventure. So it really just started close to London. We were living in Hackney at the time, and we would just take trips out to Norfolk, a great place for us to visit from there, or we'd go to Kent and down to the south to Dungeness. But we just started exploring our doorstep, I suppose. Sometimes it was even just as simple as taking a bike up the canal near Hackney and just going for a trip, taking a picnic, going for a swim in the river.
I think what we forget, Charlie, is that the UK boasts national parks, UNESCO sites, waterfalls, magnificent peaks, and it's really easy to forget that.
Yeah, I think it's back to this preconception piece, which is that we were, for one reason or other, all fall into thinking the UK was a bit boring, basically. But the variety is incredible. You've got obviously England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and across those countries, you've got real, genuine variety. And it's all steeped in history as well. You've got, for example, we were, end of last year, up on the Black Houses out on the Isle of Lewis, staying in these sort of ancient stone, incredible buildings that have been there forever, right on the coast with our own private, in inverted commas, beach with white sand and blue water. And you just can't get those experiences in a lot of countries actually around the world. So we have that kind of variety mixed with, as you say, the waterfalls, all of these peaks. And then also you have all of these creative people that get compelled towards these extremities in the UK and start interesting little businesses, whether it be, we've met quite a few foragers who take people out and teach them about all of the various different foods we can discover on these islands. And then you've got people taking out on extraordinary sailboats around the Outer Hebrides or even Norfolk, as Jess touched on. And I think for years we just didn't, again, speaking from our own perspective, and I think it probably speaks to the wider audience as well, that we just didn't realise we had that. It was all kept quite quiet. So going out there now and discovering it all ourselves and hopefully getting people excited about it feels like quite a compelling, invigorating experience from our perspective.
I think as well, when you're outside and you're in mountains or by water or wild swimming, in the mental health benefits of that I never really stopped to think about it, but it does occur to me that I feel great when I'm doing that kind of thing. It's really important to get out in some green and in nature and some beauty and breathe some clean air, isn't it?
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, actually. It has a bit of a, I don't know if this is the correct terminology, but a hippy-dippy label, wellness. It's almost overly used, so it's almost lost a bit of meaning. But the wellness piece within nature is extraordinarily prevalent. And like you say, when you're out in these spaces, you're just given a little bit of space. I remember a time when we were living in Hackney and it was early spring. There was a kind of a bit of sunshine that was coming between two really tall buildings. And I had to walk back and get back in that bit of light and bathe in it for a minute. And I thought to myself quite quickly, this is kind of crazy. Like, I'm just so grateful for this slither of light when actually I could just be outside and bathing in this light and being in green spaces not that far from this spot, maybe half an hour outside. And so we've kind of been chasing that to an extent and trying to promote that as well, because we often talk about it being like an adventure diet. So you need to keep yourself healthy. You need to keep yourself just outside your comfort zone every so often, but also in these incredible green spaces in order to give yourself a sense of perspective. I mean, if you can't see the horizon in a city, which you often can't, of course, that changes your own perspective and sense of your own personal horizons. So that's been massive for us, that journey. Yeah. And I think as we go further into that journey, we've been looking into the actual kind of psychological benefits through studies and stuff. And when you start to look into it, you're like, this is an incredible opportunity that we all have really close to where we live.
We interviewed a natural cardiologist from America a few weeks ago, and he says that there's scientific evidence to suggest that the more time we all spend outside, the longer we live. How do you feel, Jess, when you're out in the wilds and, I suppose in my head, I'm picturing some of the beautiful photographs on your Instagram and in your book. How does that make you feel when you're out in the middle of nowhere in such just stunning countryside and landscapes?
Do you know what? I've always said it makes me, in a funny way, feel insignificant, but in the best possible way. That sounds like a negative thing, but I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it as quite a positive thing. I think we can get really caught up with our own worries and everything going on, and you see yourself in the big wide world and you realise you're just quite a small part of that. And it's an amazing place. And I find that quite reassuring feeling. Yeah. But I guess it gives you that space to think. And I think also we know a lot about, even just getting out, doing physical activities, just moving is good for us as well. And it lets off endorphins and that kind of thing. So I think when you've got struggling, say, with a problem or mental health or something, getting out, breathing that fresh air and just doing that, it's amazing what it does to you. Without fail, you come back and you feel great. And I think with adventures, we hope a lot of them you can be excited about going on them, but sometimes you are feeling a bit lazy, like you don't want to leave your sofa. But you realise if you do, especially in the winter months, but if you go out for a hike in the rain, it can actually be such an amazing feeling when you get back and you coffee or whatever in front of the fire, and it's quite transformational how you then feel.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, we did a project called 5252, which I guess was relatively extreme in the sense that we did 52 UK adventures in 52 weeks. And we started this, what sounded like a just cool, fun idea. It turned out to be a completely mad plan. But my point here is that Jess got pregnant in that year time frame. And we were really lucky because she got diagnosed with something called Vasa previa, which you're far more capable to talk about than I am, but it was a high risk pregnancy. And it was quite mentally for us, especially yourself, was challenging. And alongside that, I also was going through quite a traumatic family situation, which was kind of unfolding. It was really hard, actually. And the reason why I'm bringing this in, I suppose, obviously, is that the project of going out regularly into the outdoors was the only time we were able to really feel free of all of these intense situations and all the thoughts that were going through our minds. And it felt like at that point, almost serendipitous in a way, because we were able to really stress test this theory that the outdoors had a huge effect on your well-being. And I remember we were wild camping on the southwest coast of the Isle of Mull. Gorgeous, was it March or May, perhaps evening. It was just the first signs of spring were there. And we'd had really stressful time with the situations I've just touched on. And I had just taken a pretty bad phone call, and I put the phone down and I went and we stood on the top of this hill overlooking lots of little islands and this gorgeous tropical seeming water, tropical, but of course very cold.
Very cold.
And this herd of cows came down over the hill from behind us, and there must have been, 30 of them, 40 of them. And they ran down in this joyous line towards the sea and just got in the sea and had a swim. And it was a poignant moment for me and for us, because I just thought, like, there's all of this stuff is out there happening, and we get, as Jess touched on, we get very much caught up in our own worlds and our own worries, which is very normal. But there is this kind of natural and often cost-effective natural antidote that's just sat there. So it's been really transformational, really, hasn't it? I mean, we feel very lucky to be able to do what we do, basically.
How did it help you having a difficult pregnancy and having that unexpected little explorer who turned out to be Sonny arrive? But how did it help you in those difficult stages of the pregnancy being out? Did it also help free Charlie of some of his worries and his stress and helped him cope? Did you feel it was really good for you as well?
Yeah, I did. It actually helped in a couple of ways. So before I knew about the Vasa previa, I just, for the first 3 months, we were trying to do this project and I just felt pretty sick. And I was like, well, we've got to keep doing it. We've said we're going to do it. And, it's hard we've got to do it. But actually, the only time I didn't feel terrible was when I was hiking up mountains or out doing stuff. And maybe it's the fresh air mixed with being distracted or whatever, but I don't know. But I'd come back and go, oh, I actually felt fine, until I've just got back and stopped. So in that sense, it was really beneficial. I'm not saying that would work for everyone, because I know some people, like my sister, had that awful morning sickness where you can't literally leave your bed. But for me, that was really helpful. And then when we found out about the pregnancy, they did say I had to stop most exercise, but they said hiking and stuff still fine. And they're like, just do as much of that sort of thing as you want, swimming and sort of thing. So they said it won't make any difference really, if it ends up working out or not. So we just went for it. And I think just being out there, it's a funny thing. It's that you're free from distractions, but you are also distracted in a really nice way. You're just taking in what's around you, seeing these amazing things like the swimming cows of Mull, which turns out when we got home, we actually Googled that and it is a thing.
Is it?
These specific cows, I think I'm going to get told I'm wrong now, but because there was a lot of arguments, and when we put this out on our social media, actually lots of people had a lot to say about this. But I think what happened was the farmer used to take them out for a swim, and there's an island out there which he'll take them out to graze on, and they'll swim back. He's since died, but it's imprinted on their memory, and the mothers now take all the babies with them and stuff, that they now just do it themselves, and they just take themselves for a swim. And the joy you see from them is, I guess it's similar to humans. You see, we're all just meant to live in this kind of world. That's how we existed from way back when.
I spent my life taking our kids on holiday and really never going in the pool, and because my hair, as you can probably see from today, it needs a wash. It's fairly high maintenance. And then I discovered wild swimming. I mean, what on earth was I thinking? Wild swimming is just a joy, but I've only discovered it in recent years. And my poor kids grew up with a mum who's like, I won't get in the swimming pool because I don't want to get my hair wet. The pleasures of doing those natural things out and about. If you've never tried it, you can't really describe it, I don't think, the joy you feel.
Yeah, I actually think that cold water swimming, wild swimming is a really good example of everything we're talking about. It's something that was just always there. Such a low barrier to entry, such an achievable way to have an adventurous experience. But we were all perhaps distracted by infinity pools in European countries or whatever it may be. And I think it's great because it makes you feel great, but it also has a longer lasting mental health impact as well. So we work with a fantastically inspiring, brilliant woman called Gilly MacArthur. And she's one of the leading, and I don't know if she'd want me to call her an expert, she doesn't like that term. She's specialists in getting people outdoors into cold water, talking them through breath work, talking them through the benefits. And she's just got a contract with the NHS to take people out cold water swimming, guide them through this process. And I think that in turn speaks to the way that we are waking up collectively, but also on a governmental level, to the benefits of, well, certainly outdoors, but also, more specific activities like cold water swimming, like, for example, forest bathing, which is, I've just got back from Cornwall. I've been in one of their temperate rainforests down there, talking with an incredible couple who have started
who was on this podcast previously?
Who was on this podcast previously?
Go and
Merlin and Lizzie.
Yeah, listen to that episode, because having spoken with Merlin for longer than 5 minutes, he is the most fascinating person I've ever met. But my point is, they were taking people with PTSD from the army or just life and the stresses of the modern world there and getting real results. And I just find it fascinating. It's been tarnished with this brush of being a bit out there and a bit hippie. People say that kind of stuff. And I think that's been really damaging to some of these incredible natural remedies that we have, and that people are now going, actually, maybe let's look at this a bit
closer. I think there's been some research into these things now, proper research, hasn't there, that actually is scientific based to say this is actually working. It's not just, someone going, oh, I feel a bit better, I've just been outside. So I think now that's happened, you see, like the NHS, I'm so pleased to see, what a cost effective way of helping people as well. We put all this money into drugs, which I think is great in some instances, but it's not always the answer, and often they have side effects and things like that. And if you could treat someone's, say, mental illness or whatever with cold water swimming, what a fantastic thing that they can then take forward as well.
Just to pick up on Jess's point there, we're talking about it being used as treatment for depression and the NHS, and just wanted to make the point that I think the benefits it has to someone who doesn't actually have any diagnosed mental health issues, but just keeping yourself positive and happy as someone who is fortunate enough to not suffer from depression or wherever it may be, is such a powerful tool as well.
It's a bit like going to the gym. You don't have to be in bad health and really overweight to need to go to the gym. It's just keeping your health optimal as possible. And I think that's the same with going outdoors. It's good for physical and mental health, but probably mental health more than anything. And I think trying to look at mental health a bit like that you don't need to be in a bad place to be trying to make it better and keep it at its best.
I think also we have become a bit detached from nature. And we were talking on the podcast a few weeks ago to the artist Chris Levine, and his work that's very much is about frequencies and energy and light. He took the famous portraits of the late Queen 20 years ago and captured her with her eyes closed, and beautiful work. He's doing a project at the pyramids at the minute. And he said we've disconnected from nature. And I do think there is a move back by a lot of people now to realise that we've forgotten all these benefits and ancient remedies, and just sitting some morning sunlight, resetting your circadian rhythm, sitting with that coffee in the morning, getting the light into your eyes is so good for you, rather than immediately going to the sleeping pill. Or we're moving back now, I think, to nature. And I think with the sort of work you're doing is so inspiring. And I think where it really inspires me, because I've always been up for a bit of an adventure, is how you've sold it as a weave it into your life. You don't have to plan your week away. It can be that cycle ride, can't it, along the canal on an afternoon. It can be part of your world.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the name Achievable Adventure, you've got the alliteration, which is obviously nice, but we like it because it's a personal concept and it's a scalable concept. So what is an adventure for myself might be different to what it is for you. And that's something, there's some beauty in that. I think what we've experienced over the past 6 years, less so now, but certainly when we started with people gatekeeping the term adventure, that's not an adventure. And we always find that bizarre. You know, what do you mean it's not an adventure? No, I find that adventurous, so therefore it's an adventure to me. It's a personal concept. And then the scalable thing. So it might be that I really want to go away and do this incredible mountain climb in Scotland, but my life is too busy at this point in time. It's too expensive. I haven't got the time. I haven't got anyone to go with, whatever it may be. So you can scale that back, and perhaps you've got a night. You could go down to the South Downs and hike along the coast there. Or perhaps it's just that you've got an evening. So you buy a little gas stove cooker and go to a hill near you and cook up some food as the sun sets. And you'll get that fix of adventure. It may not be the full whack, but it will be just a little bit that will satisfy and relax you, and all the things that we've been speaking about. That's kind of our thing, I suppose, is saying, like, reframe the way you view adventure. It doesn't always have to be adrenaline fueled. It doesn't always have to be to these sort of faraway lands on an aeroplane. It can be much more localized.
And these messages come through loud and clear in your book, because you've graded each adventure, haven't you, Jess, in terms of how fit you need to be, or whether it's the bottom end of the budget, or whether you need to push your budget a little higher. It really feels like a complete guide. Was that really intentional when you created the book, to allow people to dip in and find their level?
Yeah, it was. And that's something we felt is so important about it being achievable for everyone. Different things are achievable at different times in our lives as well. So for us, it's changed from being the two of us versus the three of us and things like that. So we felt it was really important to show what you can do. You know, if someone does want a longer adventure, but doesn't maybe have loads of money to spend on it, or if you want to do something a bit more special and blow out, or if you really do just have an evening and you're just trying to fit stuff in around a super busy job that you have, what can you do? And I think that's what's felt really important to us. And it's about breaking that 9 to 5 loop a bit. When you look back on the week, what do you remember about it? What have you done differently? Because you go to work, you come back, is there something different that, and those things stand out. And over the course of a year, they really make a difference, I think, to your happiness and how you feel, and even probably how you perform at work and stuff, you know, how you, when you go in and the different ideas you have. So yeah, it's important to us that everyone can do an adventure. It doesn't matter who you are. There's amazing people, you know, doing things who are in wheelchairs or aren't able to walk, or people who, I guess, just have absolutely no time, or loads of kids or whatever. It was actually, we found it was quite beneficial in many ways to have become pregnant and had a high-risk pregnancy and had a baby during that time, because we felt a lot of them we did just the two of us, which is maybe appealing for people who want something a bit more and have that ability. But then some of them are just very easy with a baby or a toddler or whatever. So we just want to make sure everyone feels like there's something for them. As Charlie said, it's not just for these high-level athletes and adventurers who say, no, it's ours, and other people feeling a bit anxious to even step out into that space.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Jess. If you had to choose your favourite place and adventure that you've discovered on your 3-year journey, where would be your magical go-to? And I know you'll be spoilt for choice.
Yeah, that is a tricky one, but there is one that really stood out to us, I think, because it was in winter, which I think is often a time people don't think it's the right time to do it. It was in Norfolk, which was great, but it's not this sort of, you know, people think of Scotland and the epic sort of bits. It's not far from London, but we went out and we went sailing one winter's morning with a company called the Coastal Exploration Company. It's run by a guy called Henry, a very inspirational guy. So I think that has often been part of our adventures, is not only have we done something amazing, but met incredible people. He's ex-Marines and ex-UN worker, some amazing stories. But he's bought some old sort of muscle boats from the area, and he's, I guess, done them up, and they've got these beautiful red sails. We got very lucky with the weather. It was one of those crisp winter mornings, and they took us out. There's some salt marshes, and they are known as the old smugglers' routes, because it's the way people used to get in when they were smuggling stuff into the UK. The sandbanks change with the tide, so to navigate them, it's quite tricky. You really need to know what you're doing. So the smugglers knew, and obviously it's quite hard for people to patrol. So it was quite an interesting history there. You're out in a part of the UK, it's a nature reserve, and so you're not allowed to hike there or anything. So the only way you can access it is by a tiny boat. So you're the only people out there, and you're amongst amazing nature. And you see a part of the UK, you know, that isn't surrounded with people, and just it is as it naturally was probably thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. And it was just a very special morning. We went out on these boats. I was 7 months pregnant at the time and heard these amazing stories from these incredible people, but also it was absolutely beautiful. And I think that it was just a bit of a pinch me moment, and we just couldn't believe we were in the UK, I think, more than anything. It just didn't feel... If you think about the soggy sandwiches and anoraks that was miles from there, it was so photogenic as well, which just, just everywhere you looked, it was a picture.
Charlie, what about you?
The story, as Jess touched on there, was very special. I don't want to give the obvious answer of the Outer Hebrides, but I'm struggling to peel myself away from the allure of that answer. So I'm going to go with it, I think. Yeah, the Outer Hebrides. I think when you think of the UK, it's similar to what Jess was describing, Norfolk. You don't think of white sand beaches. You don't think of crystal clear, pristine water. Perhaps as a Londoner, anyway, you don't think of these things.
Turquoise water too.
Turquoise, yeah. And you certainly, again, as a Londoner, you don't really think of these landscapes where you feel like you might be the only person within a several square miles. So we were lucky enough to go. We've been in a couple of times, but for the book, we went up. Was Sonny alive then? Yeah, he was, wasn't he? We went
to
up.
Harris and Lewis.
Yeah. We went up to Harris, the Isle of Harris and Lewis up there, and it was freezing cold. But luckily, on the whole, didn't rain too much, and we were able to drive around these islands, staying in sort of basically the cheapest Airbnbs we could find, which were great. Absolutely perfect for our needs. So it was all pretty low cost. And having, cups of tea on the beach, cooking up. For example, one time we were stopped by a bloke in a car who said, if you ever want any fresh seafood, I'm a fisherman around here and I'll come and buy some off me at the dock. So the next day we got an obscene amount of fresh prawns. He'd just dragged them out the ocean for not much money, and we cooked them up on the beach there. And it felt like the type of living that I kind of had always dreamed of. It felt kind of very wild and very free. And the landscapes are just... You just don't associate them with the UK. So I think that's probably the most, if we use the word epic, probably the most epic place we've been.
But sometimes adventure just finds you. So I remember being on the Isle of Harris and recording a podcast at the gin distillery.
Yeah.
And as part of the podcast, I met the fisherman who gets the sea kelp, which infuses Harris gin.
Yeah.
And then he said, if you've ever got time to come out for the day, I'll take you fishing. And he collects by hand. He puts on a big, wetsuit or dry suit. I'm going to get this, one or the other. Yeah. And goes and hand picks scallops. And obviously the food's really fresh up there. So sometimes you can have an adventure, or an adventure can find you. And I didn't have time to do it. And I've always promised myself that the next time I get up to that part of the world, I will look Lewis up and I will take him up on his offer, and I'll go fishing with him, which would be...
You should. I mean, I find, sorry, just pick up on that like what we talk about a lot is having a yes attitude, within the... you've got to be safe and all the rest of it, but just being really open to stuff. And then once you open yourself up, it's amazing what you attract. But also we talk a lot about setting ourselves precedents. So the older you get, the more stuck in your ways you get, unless you try and actively do something to counteract that natural shift. And what we try and do is set ourselves precedents for saying yes to things. If someone says, do you want to come out on my boat and do this thing? Perhaps the inclination is like, oh, there's too many unknowns there. Like, is the person going to be a bit odd, or, is it going to be a bit boring? Will I get back in time for X, Y, Z? But now we just say, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. And I think that's led to a decent percentage of our most amazing experiences. So I completely agree.
It's funny that Jess mentioned winter, because I suppose I'm more of an autumn winter girl in some ways. And what really appeals to me, not having a real fire in an apartment in Shepherd's Bush, is, curling up by the fire with a glass of red wine, having cheeks burning from an amazing hike or walk or whatever. And when I picked out a few of my favourites from Instagram and your book, the first one that really leapt out to me is Blue Hour in the snowy mountains of the Lake District, where you were off grid in this teeny little cabin. Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah, amazing, really. I mean, I think it actually links into the thing about setting ourselves a precedent. So Sonny was, I'm going to guess, like 1 maybe. And this cabin right up in the mountains there was, I don't know what square footage it was, but it basically fit a bed in. It fit a shower in it, did it? It was really small. It was really small. Yeah. And you had to hike up to it, so you couldn't get anywhere near it in a car. And I think...
And it was snowing.
And it was thick snow. So a lot of this sort of natural inclination is like, we can't take a baby up there. But we thought, why not? So we took Sonny up there and we spent maybe probably 24, 36 hours up there. And we got extremely lucky because it had snowed this blanket of, well, it snowed intensely whilst we were there, and then it all settled and blue hour came in and was just this extraordinary experience.
What is blue hour?
The light, basically. When
I've never heard of blue hour.
It's after the sunset, but before it gets dark. You know, when the sun's set, but there's still the glow from it, it leaves a bit of a blue hue, which is a favourite of photographers quite often.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have explained that. But we had this basically, if you want to look at it through the lens of colour, we had these sheet snow. It settled and we got pink clouds, and it went more sort of rich and deep, and then went through to this blue, and then through to black and the stars. We had front row seats at this bit of theatre that was only ever going to happen once, and we were there, front row seats and alone, you know. So yeah, it was just a special moment, one of those moments where you just have to take stock, and it stays with you. You know, we often say, like, hopefully the experiences in the book will last far longer than any suntan, which is a comment on the holidays that we used to think were like what you wanted. You could go to a villa in Spain and get a suntan, you know, that's great. But now we're looking for experiences that will stay with you and inform your personality and decision making for months, maybe even years to come. And that was a great example of one that just, I'll never forget it, basically.
The Isle of Sark stood out to me for many reasons. One of the reasons is I'd never heard of the Isle of Sark in England. And I think you described it, Jess, as one of your best finds of 2022.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. We actually hadn't heard of it, I don't think, until we got contacted to actually do a job out there. It was through our agency, because we do photography and video through our agency, and we got asked to go out there to shoot for them. And we started looking up a bit more about the island, and one of the Channel Islands, but very small, quite near Jersey, I believe, or Guernsey. I can't remember which is the closest. But anyway, there's no cars on the island, so you get around by horse and cart or bike.
Or tractor.
So you can get picked up from the port by a tractor who will take you with your suitcases. I mean, it's a very rocky island, so we went out to a point one night and had a picnic, and it was beautiful. It feels around there, there's a bit of a microclimate as well. We had amazing weather when we were there. We got lucky, I think, but also we felt like we could be, well, definitely not, well, it's got to get it right. It's not the UK, it's part of the British Isles. So I have to get that right, because you get told off for that. But you didn't feel like you're anywhere near Britain, to be honest. It just somewhere in Europe, I don't know, on the Mediterranean or something. It was just a very special place and very unique. Like, you'd go into the dairy where you could go and just pick up fresh milk or make yourself some ice cream. It was just a really unique place where things are just done quite differently. And so you're really forced to slow down when you've got no cars. You have to walk or get the bike somewhere. You're forced to get out and get the fresh air. And just the landscape as well, with all these sort of jagged rocks. It's quite epic. It was just very unique. And again, not somewhere I believe was part of the British Isles at all.
And also Wales and Northern Ireland have plenty to offer too, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think I put out Northern Ireland really because, I mean, I don't know, if you took a survey of everyone you know, I wonder how many people had even been to Northern Ireland. I would guess probably not that many, and we were in that camp until 2 years ago, I think. And when we got there, thought was, why do not more people come here? It's an extraordinary place, dramatic. The coastline is absolutely gorgeous. And then you've got things like a lot of the Game of Thrones scenes were filmed there. And that's obviously interesting for people who are fans of the show, but I think it speaks to this almost ancient beauty and uniqueness that they have on offer there. There's the
Giant's Causeway.
Well, there's Giant's Causeway is this sort of the famous one, but I'm thinking of the Game of Thrones road, which is these old interwoven beech trees that create a natural tunnel down this one road. And it's got incredible surf. I'm rubbish at surfing, but we give it a go. We surfed out there in October.
Brave.
Well, thick wetsuit. We got bullied by the waves for an hour, but it was more just about doing it and being out on a board off the coast of Northern Ireland in October, just thinking, this is a cool place to be right now. You know, something I didn't think I would be doing, but here I am.
What I also love is that you really mix it up accommodation wise. So we might catch you in a tent somewhere. You do always make it look amazing. That isn't how I would look in my tent, because you've both got gorgeous taste, and I think you work with beautiful multiple brands. So I liked your hiking boots, Jess. I was looking those up, the ones with the red laces. Oh my goodness.
That's the biggest question we get asked probably about.
I think I'm going to get some of those because I think hiking boots can last you a lifetime if you buy something decent. But I also, I like your style, Jess. Your style's very nice too. You look like your dab hand on that fire as well when you're cooking up on the beach. But you've stayed in camper vans and tree houses and cabins and tents, and that's all part of the adventure, I'm guessing, Jess, is it, where you stay?
Yeah, so it's why we've tried to really mix it up is two reasons. Firstly, from a budget perspective, to show that, in the UK, you can find really cost-effective solutions. There are some really special things to do as well that are really unique and different. But it's also, as you say, that can be a big part of the adventure. And especially in winter months, I think that can be quite relevant because, say, in the summer, you maybe don't mind. Sometimes in the summer, we'll just go for the cheapest, boring Airbnb that just does the job and we're out all day. But if you go and stay somewhere that's in the middle of, a temperate rainforest or something, you are immersed in that place immediately and you are already, that is part of the adventure. You might be cooking outside. Often they're quite sort of small cabins or something like that. Or if you're in a camper van or something, the nature's on your doorstep. So you can actually just look out your window and it's just there. You step outside, you have your morning coffee, just immersed amongst it. And I think that is quite special. And I think also makes it achievable for people who think, okay, it all sounds great, but I don't actually find it very appealing, the thought of hiking to the top of a mountain or necessarily swimming in freezing cold water, both of which I highly recommend trying. But it's, I think everyone can find joy in that and actually just being out there in nature. And as Charlie's touched on, one of the main things we say to people to dip your toe into adventure is try cooking outdoors. We all like to eat on the whole, and food just tastes better somehow. You can just cook baked beans on toast or whatever, but it just tastes better when you cook it outside and then you sit amongst nature while you eat it.
I'd imagine some of the places you go, you touched on the Outer Hebrides and fish, but depending on where you are in the UK, you also often have access to local produce and delicious produce, probably fairly simple stuff that, as you say, tastes better. Do you both enjoy that cooking aspect outdoors or on the beach or wherever you are in that very simple type of fashion?
Yeah, I think we both love food, so that helps. And so it often becomes quite a focal point for us of our adventures. But I think it can be part of the adventure, as you say, in terms of finding those fresh local ingredients. And Charlie said, if you're getting prawns from a fisherman straight off the boat, we couldn't believe how much we got for, I think, like £10 we had.
Too much.
We couldn't eat it. It was mad. But then also, you don't need to do that much with it. It's often quite simple how you cook them. And we've met some amazing people along the way who forage and have taught us about foraging. And I think that's really opened our eyes up. We met a guy recently who was saying if people actually knew how to forage and we instead looked after our nature properly rather than over farming, there would be plenty of food to go around for everyone to eat really healthily and abundantly in the UK. He was showing us on just a standard garden lawn how many things in there you can eat and how many things are really nutritious for you, which is fascinating. The problem is there's so much fear, I suppose, about getting it wrong, and you don't want to get it wrong. But if people were educated properly, there's loads you can do. We also, in Wales, there was a guy called Craig who does foraging around the sea and also along the shoreline. And he said, you'll never look at the beach the same way after this course that we went on. And he's right, because he was showing us things like, if you see like an air bubble in the sand, that you have to tap on it, I think. And if it squirts water up, you've got to raise a clam underneath. And it was amazing just the way he was looking at everything. And he was very careful not to over harvest things and working in connection with nature to make sure it could thrive at the same time as feeding people.
Another character that stood out from your book was the guy who, I'm trying to think where it was now. I wonder if it was Derbyshire, but you went pony trekking.
Yeah, fell trekking.
Fell trekking, that's
Fell pony
it.
trekking, yeah.
Yes.
God, yes, so I've forgotten about him. Tom, I think was his name. He's an extraordinary character. Craig, who Jess has touched on, Henry, the guy with the sailboats, all of these people have a couple of common threads, and one of them is that they're doing something really interesting. And the other one is just passion, and infectious passion. And the fell pony trekking was a great example of that, because Tom was extremely passionate about teaching people about fell ponies and how important they can be as a tool for exploring landscapes.
And they're a dying breed as well. I think that's worth pointing out. So he's trying to was
keep them alive as a species in the UK. Yeah. And we went out with him trekking across the mountains of the Lake District whilst our ponies carried lunch, and you can stay overnight and wild camp with them, but we didn't have enough time, unfortunately. But all the while you're going across these sort of ancient routes that these ponies, that's their bread and butter, if you want to call it that. They walk these routes and have done for centuries. And you're learning as you walk from a voice of extraordinary authority and passion. Very calm guy, really kind guy. And we spent, I don't know, was it a day, if that, maybe 3/4 of a day with him, and came away just thinking, wow, like he was an incredibly special person to have been able to spend time with.
He had a lot of stories from his own past and do a lot of activism work, I think, in the 80s. But then also his father used to have some fell ponies. I think that's where it started from. But he was actually, I might have got this wrong, I think his father was a lawyer, but had befriended the traveller community, and he then represented them often for free because they never got representation. So he was sort of very friendly with them. He used to take the ponies to these, you know, the sort of
the fairs,
and then became really friendly with them and started helping them out with different legal cases and stuff. So you could just sit and talk to him for another person, perhaps.
I think you could film my podcast, or actually you could have the Travel Project podcast featuring. That'd be another little spin-off for you. I did actually like the fact that Charlie mentioned there that the ponies were carrying his lunch. So obviously food is the big thing.
Absolutely.
But of course, when you're doing all these adventures, I know something else for you that's at the heart of it as well is the well-being of our planet, and that feels great too, to get out and have an adventure and know that you're not contributing to the climate crisis. How important has the environment and the planet also been for you too, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question because we always talk about it like we want it just to be part of our project and not like a sort of badge of honor that we wear, because we feel like that contrives it in a way that detracts from what we're trying to achieve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally get that.
But it is important to us, yeah. And I think, if I'm really honest, it wasn't overly important at the beginning of the project to me personally. And that's just me being fully transparent, because I think that's quite important to be transparent. But as we explored and discovered all these amazing places and spoke to these people, I via osmosis became very aware of what we have and how precious it is, and very aware of the message that we were putting out and the responsibility that we had for that message to be one that was not only not harmful, but was positively impactful in terms of sustainability and making sure people were educated through what we did. So we have this rule where there are no aeroplanes, which can be really inconvenient as a rule, I think it's fair to say. But that's all part of it. And a lot of the time, it's actually not inconvenient, it's incredible. So going to Northern Ireland, we had to drive up to Liverpool and we got this ferry over there that took forever and a day. But it was very much part of the adventure. And I hope in doing so, we show people that you can have these adventures without having a huge carbon footprint, and also hopefully are showing people get out there and explore. And the more people who get out there and explore, the more people will go on a journey like that I've just touched on, that I have, which is that, hold on a second, we need to be careful with this stuff because it's so beautiful and it is being kind of stripped away from us, as we see. I was at this place in Cornwall, and it was one of, I think it was, is it 0.2% of our temperate rainforest still surviving in the UK, and the how important temperate rainforests and the ecosystem are to the well-being of the UK and the planet is extraordinary, and we're just killing it constantly.
I came away with ordering a book on the mycelium network. Inspired was I by Merlin's fantastic walk in that ancient forest.
He's incredible.
Jess, you're a mum now, and you did have a little unexpected guest on your travels. How has motherhood and seeing adventure through Sonny's young eyes changed your view, or has it changed your view?
I suppose whether it's changed it or not, it made me feel more strongly about it. I think firstly, you realise the joy you can take in the simple things. So adventures don't always have to be really epic or expensive. And just going out and seeing the world through a young person's eyes is quite incredible, because they take joy in things that I think as adults we can sometimes take for granted. And so I think just seeing the joy he gets from, I don't know, having a picnic outside, paddling in a stream or something, it's just quite amazing. And also seeing how much it affects his happiness. If he's ever frustrated or anything like that, as soon as you get him outdoors, he is much happier. And that's what's led us to look into actual research around it. Unbelievable stats, like children who spend a minimum of at least an hour outdoors a day are 50% less likely to have mental health problems. And then it's, as Charlie says, I think you also have that feeling of responsibility, because we obviously all want the planet to be okay for future generations, but I think you feel that more strongly when you have your own children. And that's where it's become quite important to us to be sustainable, but also educating them about the outdoors, because it makes you want to protect it. So the more people who get to enjoy it and spend time in it, I think the more people who will try and protect it. We're not telling people to never take planes again, because it's not realistic. And also, I don't think that's actually good either. I think you would create these very, it's good to connect with different cultures. And I think that's really important. But we were saying if people could just change their habits so that you go, once, maybe twice a year, you go on your big trip or whatever. But then on those other times, try and look either closer to home. It doesn't even mean necessarily staying in the UK. You can get trains to France and over to Europe. But just changing your habits there can actually have a huge amount of difference in terms of our impact on the planet. It's all these things we were already realizing slowly, but it's just it's hit us a lot harder, I think, since having a kid, and it's sped up that process and just makes us enjoy it more. I think when you see their joy, it gives you a lot of joy, and he just seems to love it. And I think most kids do, to be honest.
I think they do. What is next, Charlie? Just touched a little bit there on some research you're doing, but where do you go next with all of this?
Yeah, so I mean, we've always looked at our project in a kind of almost TV format, if you want to call it that. So series, so followable series, so that people can kind of follow along and understand what they're watching and reading. We've just finished the book, launched a book, so it's like, what next? We've been having that question quite a lot internally between the two of us. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on actually UK unique sleeps or staycation options, so places you can actually stay. Again, there's going to be a real scale in there for different budgets and timeframes, etc. And the idea is to show the variety we have here in the UK, all of these different places that not only might be an incredible structure, it might be a converted World War II structure, or it might be a lighthouse or a cabin in the mountains, but also there are lots of places popping up around the UK that have incredible people attached to them and incredible culture built around them, where you can just go and not have to go far from where you're staying and have this extraordinary adventurous experience. So yeah, that's what we're going to do next. We're calling it Unique Sleeps at the minute. Working title.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I just want to say a huge thank you. You've put so much effort into coming up from the Cotswolds today and making this happen. And I felt it's just a treat, really, to just grill you on all those adventures that I've seen both on your Instagram and on your book. So best of luck with everything you do. And I will be giving you some feedback, actually, because I'm planning in the book the next project for me, and I think it's probably going to be the ponies, and just start off with with a day with my lunch on the pony. Because I'm also all about people, and I loved the idea of Tom and his stories.
He's fantastic.
So thank you for inspiring me.
No, thank you for having us. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you very much for having us.
You've been listening to Charlie Wild and Jess Last, co-founders of the Travel Project. If you fancy trying out some of their adventures in the UK, then do order a copy of Achievable Adventures. It's a beautiful book which you can dip in and out of and find something to suit your ambitions and budget and what you fancy doing. And you can follow Charlie and Jess on Instagram at the.travel.project. Download and subscribe to our podcast at convex.podbean.com, or search The Convex Conversation on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to yours. I'll be back next week with another great guest. I'll see you then.